Vanished in the night, the mysterious disappearance of Karen Swift, on the chilly autumn morning of October 30, 2011, in Dyersburg, Tennessee, a thick fog blanketed the deserted road. Streetlights flickered weakly over the damp pavement. A 2004 Nissan Murano sat motionless by the roadside, one tire deflated. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no trace of its owner. But strangely enough, the driver's seat wasn't adjusted the way Karen Swift always said it. Karen Swift, 44, was a devoted mother, a strong woman, but trapped in an unhappy marriage. Just 3 weeks earlier, she had filed for divorce. The night before she vanished, Karen had attended a Halloween party with friends. She drove home, picked up her daughter from a sleepover, and tucked her into bed. That was the last time anyone saw Karen alive. The next morning, her 2 daughters woke up to an eerie silence. Karen was gone. Her phone went unanswered, her messages unread. And then, her car appeared somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. A mother vanished in the night. A faint trace left on an empty road. And one haunting question: what really happened to Karen Swift? When Karen Swift failed to return home on the morning of October 30, 2011, her family and friends grew anxious. The first person to report her missing wasn't a stranger, it was her husband, David Swift. David called several of Karen's friends, asking if they knew where she was. No one had an answer. Then, he contacted the police to report his wife missing. But David wasn't the only one alarmed by her disappearance. Karen's friends, Bill and Kathy Bona, also called the police shortly after, as if they had a bad feeling about the situation. When officers arrived at the scene, they found David already there, standing next to the abandoned Nissan Murano. He told them he had found his wife's car on Millsfield Highway, just a few minutes' drive from their home. David explained that he had grown worried when he couldn't reach Karen, so he went out searching for her. But there was one odd detail: he never mentioned seeing his wife leave the house the night before. Karen's car showed no signs of forced entry. Her purse, keys, and phone were all missing. A rusty nail was found in the tire, causing it to go flat. Was this just an unfortunate accident, or had someone deliberately staged the scene? Police began questioning David. At first, he claimed he hadn't seen Karen when she returned home that night. But later, he changed his story, saying he had, in fact, seen her in the kitchen and even remembered what she was wearing: a gray jacket and ripped jeans. These inconsistencies immediately caught the detective's attention. When asked about their marriage, David admitted that things had been rocky. He mentioned that Karen had a secret phone he had recently discovered. According to him, the phone had been purchased by another man, hinting that his wife had something to hide. But when police checked David's call records, they found that he had actually known about the phone much earlier, not after Karen disappeared, but days before. David also had suspicious injuries. He was using crutches and claimed he could barely move due to a knee injury. However, witnesses reported seeing him just days earlier at a local event, lifting 60-pound hay bales without any difficulty, and without crutches. Was he really injured, or was this part of a larger scheme to cover something up? Police expanded their search around Karen Swift's home and discovered 2 discarded cell phones in a wooded area near Harness Road, less than 500 feet from her house. One was Karen's primary phone, and the other was the so-called secret phone her husband had mentioned. Records showed that Karen's main phone lost signal at 4:38 a.m. on October 30th. The second phone registered a voicemail check at 9:55 a.m. that same day before it also went offline. Both phones were later found close together, seemingly hidden by someone. When investigators compared David Swift's phone records, they found that he had called the second phone before Karen disappeared, despite previously claiming he had no knowledge of its existence. This discrepancy made detectives even more suspicious of his statements. inside David's home, police found 7 gallons of bleach. When questioned, David explained that he had used it to clean up after the family dog had been poisoned by a neighbor. However, keeping such a large amount of bleach on hand, especially when no significant mess was found, seemed odd. Another chilling clue emerged when a police officer over 6 feet tall sat in Karen's Nissan Murano to move it to the impound lot. The seat position was already set for someone of his height, meaning Karen, who was only 5 feet 5 inches, was not the last person to drive the car. This raised serious doubts about who had been behind the wheel after she vanished. Karen's bedroom showed no signs of a struggle, but her daughter's room appeared disturbed. The bedding had been moved, and the furniture was slightly rearranged. Could this be evidence that someone had carried the girls from their beds to another part of the house that night, without leaving obvious traces? David Swift continued to insist he had nothing to do with his wife's disappearance. However, during interrogations, his story kept shifting. At first, he said he hadn't seen Karen come home. Later, he gave a detailed description of what she was wearing that night. These inconsistencies made him the primary suspect, but without forensic evidence, there was nothing to directly tie him to the crime. No DNA. No signs of a struggle. No evidence of murder inside the house. Even though all the clues pointed to David, police couldn't gather enough proof to charge him. As time passed, investigators kept searching for Karen Swift. There were no signs of a struggle in the home, no physical evidence linking David to her disappearance. But one thing was clear: David was hiding something. Was he a grieving husband, truly worried about his missing wife? Or was he involved in Karen's disappearance, and if so, what had he done to her? On December 10, 2011, 6 weeks after Karen Swift vanished, 2 men were leaving Bledsoe Cemetery when they noticed something buried beneath the thick kudzu vines. As they got closer, they realized it wasn't an inanimate object, it was the body of a woman. Police quickly arrived at the scene and confirmed the worst: it was Karen Swift. Her body had been left in a near-mutilated state, her clothes torn, with clear signs that she had been dragged across the ground. The autopsy revealed severe head trauma, likely caused by a blunt object. However, due to the advanced decomposition from exposure to the elements, the exact cause of death could not be determined with certainty. The case was now officially classified as a homicide. But there was no murder weapon, no signs of a struggle inside Karen's home, and no foreign DNA on her remains. All direct evidence had been wiped away, making it harder than ever to identify her killer. Yet, investigators remained focused on David Swift. Karen had been murdered shortly after filing for divorce. The inconsistencies in his statements, combined with his obsession over her personal life, made him the prime suspect. Karen's friends told police that David had been stalking her, constantly calling her when she went out, unexpectedly showing up at places she was visiting. Some witnesses even claimed to have seen him standing in the shadows outside her friends' homes, trying to see what was happening inside. But if David truly was the killer, the biggest question remained unanswered: how did he do it? Despite mounting suspicion, police never found enough evidence to charge David Swift. For years, Karen Swift's case remained an unsolved mystery, leaving her family and community trapped in an endless cycle of confusion and grief. After more than a decade of unanswered questions, David Swift was arrested in Alabama in July 2023 and extradited to Tennessee on charges of first-degree murder. While no new forensic evidence was disclosed, prosecutors claimed they had finally gathered enough to bring charges against him. The trial drew massive public attention. Prosecutors painted David as a controlling and jealous husband, enraged by Karen's decision to file for divorce. Karen's friends testified that he stalked her, called her obsessively, and showed up unannounced at her house. Cell phone records showed that both of Karen's phones were turned off near their home before being discarded in the woods. However, David's defense team fought back aggressively. They argued that there was no direct forensic evidence linking him to Karen's death. There was no trace of blood in their home, in the car, or on David himself. No witnesses saw him leave the house that night. They emphasized that the testimony from Karen's friends was circumstantial and not concrete proof of guilt. After weeks of deliberation, the jury acquitted David of first-degree and second-degree murder but failed to reach a unanimous decision on the charge of manslaughter. With the trial ending in a mistrial, prosecutors announced their intention to retry the case, ensuring that the fight for justice was far from over. Even 12 years later, the death of Karen Swift remains unresolved. David Swift was acquitted of murder, but the possibility of a retrial left the public deeply divided. Some believe he was guilty but covered his tracks too well, while others think police failed to find the real killer and simply focused on one suspect without enough evidence. Karen's family continues to seek justice. They firmly believe someone is responsible for her death, and if it wasn't David, then who was it? Other theories have surfaced, including the possibility of a third party being involved. Some suspicion fell on a neighbor of the Swifts, who had been arrested for animal cruelty on the same day Karen disappeared. However, police never found any evidence linking him to the case. The town of Dyersburg remains haunted by the mystery. Those who knew Karen cannot forget the devoted, joyful mother whose life ended in such tragedy. Rumors continue to spread, but the truth remains elusive. Meanwhile, David Swift, now living in Alabama, continues to deny the accusations. However, he has not completely avoided legal trouble. Beyond Karen's case, he also faced charges of stalking and harassing his second wife, whom he later divorced. This raised even more unsettling questions about his true nature. Was Karen's murder a crime of passion covered up too well to prove, or was the real killer still out there, hiding in plain sight? Even 12 years later, the death of Karen Swift remains unresolved. David Swift was acquitted of murder, but the possibility of a retrial left the public deeply divided. Some believe he was guilty but covered his tracks too well, while others think police failed to find the real killer and simply focused on one suspect without enough evidence. Karen's family continues to seek justice. They firmly believe someone is responsible for her death, and if it wasn't David, then who was it? Other theories have surfaced, including the possibility of a third party being involved. Some suspicion fell on a neighbor of the Swifts, who had been arrested for animal cruelty on the same day Karen disappeared. However, police never found any evidence linking him to the case. The town of Dyersburg remains haunted by the mystery. Those who knew Karen cannot forget the devoted, joyful mother whose life ended in such tragedy. Rumors continue to spread, but the truth remains elusive. Meanwhile, David Swift, now living in Alabama, continues to deny the accusations. However, he has not completely avoided legal trouble. Beyond Karen's case, he also faced charges of stalking and harassing his second wife, whom he later divorced. This raised even more unsettling questions about his true nature. Was Karen's murder a crime of passion covered up too well to prove, or was the real killer still out there, hiding in plain sight? The case of Karen Swift is more than just a personal tragedy. It remains a haunting mystery for the community of Dyersburg. For years, rumors and theories about her death have continued to spread. With David Swift never convicted, the story remains clouded in uncertainty. Did the police arrest the wrong person, or was there simply never enough evidence to convict the real killer? In the years since her murder, small details have surfaced, but none strong enough to complete the puzzle. Those who were close to Karen still believe she was killed by someone she knew, someone who understood her habits and her life. But if it wasn't David, then who else had a motive? The case files remain open. But time is erasing the traces. Witnesses' memories fade, physical evidence deteriorates. Authorities may want to reopen the case, but can they build a stronger case than before? Or will this be their final attempt before the case fades into obscurity? Dyersburg is no longer a town of silent secrets. The community remembers Karen Swift, but they have also come to accept the possibility that justice may never come, and somewhere, whether it's a killer who was never caught or an innocent man who lived under suspicion for years, the truth remains buried, waiting to be brought into the light.